If you want a boost in height for your 2004 through 2020 F-150, but you don't want to get super involved in your suspension or dish out a bunch of cash for a full-blown lift kit, this 3-inch front, 2-inch rear leveling kit is a perfect solution for you. Now this offers a decent amount of height for the front and back of the truck, which offers some better ground clearance, a level stance, and a more aggressive look that you may be going for without swapping components and drastically changing your ride quality if you do want to keep the factory comfort and performance that you're used to. Now with being very simple as far as the kit is concerned, it's also super affordable compared to other 3-inch lift kits and leaves you room to customize your suspension if you don't want to be locked into a full lift kit and want to mix and match components that will benefit your lifestyle best. I do want to mention right off the bat that this kit does not fit the Raptor model, so just make sure that you're getting the right kit for your truck. Now with only a couple components, this makes for a big improvement in the presence of your F-150 with a decent increase in height, allowing for better ground clearance underneath the truck to eliminate contact with obstacles if you are ever taking your truck on the dirt or on the work site. Now the offset 3 inches in the front and 2 in the rear is also there to help eliminate the rake in the hood for a more level look, and the increase in height in the front increases the room in the wheel well as well to fit up to a 35-inch tire very comfortably. Now because this isn't swapping struts, shocks, or other components, it mostly maintains your factory ride, and I say mostly because this doesn't come with some accommodating components to correct for all of the suspension geometry that was thrown off when lifting the kit. Now that can affect how the truck rides, so I do recommend adding some upper control arms and shock extensions, or even adding some shocks into the mix for the rear for an improvement in the performance that this kit brings to the table. Now each component here is a little different in its construction. So starting off with the strut spacers in the front, these have a forged billet aluminum T6 treated construction with a corrosion-resistant black anodized finish on top. I also do want to mention that these spacers don't measure true to 3 inches, but rather 2 inches. And the spring compression and the suspension geometry combined with this 2-inch spacer here results in that 3-inch lift in the front. Now the rear spacers, however, are true to size at 2 inches tall, and each of these consists of a fabricated steel material that is tapered for the correct pinion angle and includes alignment pins for easy installation. Now those are also covered in a textured black powder coat, and the rest of the kit comes with all of the hardware needed, including the zinc-plated U-bolts when it comes to install. Now this kit is about $225, making it one of the most affordable options on the page for a 3-inch front, 2-inch rear lift kit. Now most other options will include different components in the kit like lifted struts, coilovers, or even added upper control arms and some other accommodating components, which will up the price and also completely change the ride and the performance that you get out of your truck. Now those more involved kits can also keep you locked into certain components, as where this kit again allows you to choose what you want to do, whether it be to add on slowly or pair this with a performance shock or upper control arm. Now regardless of what you want to do with this kit, this is one of the most affordable ways to get a good amount of height on your truck if that is your main goal, making this a great solution for you. Now install here is a 2 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter. I would say a tougher 2 out of 3, so I recommend a good amount of mechanical experience in order to tackle the job, and with that, it should take about 4 hours or so in order to install. Now at this point, I am going to hand it over to one of our installers here. They're going to show you a detailed breakdown on how you can bolt this up to your F-150 at home. So that wraps it up for what I have to say. Let's go ahead and get to the install.
For this install, you will need a pry bar, a large hammer, a caliper hanger tool, various size ratchets, various impacts, a swivel adapter, 5 and 8 millimeter Allen sockets, 8, 10, 13, 15, 17, 18, 21, and 22 millimeter sockets, some locator bolts, a magnet, a bungee cord, pliers, flathead screwdriver, 8, 13, 15, and 18 millimeter wrenches, also 21 and 22 millimeter wrenches. Also not shown here is a pole jack and jack stands. All right, today we're going to be installing a lift kit on our F-150, so let's get started. All right, so what we're going to need to do for this is remove basically our entire hub assembly to gain access and give ourselves enough room to get our strut out and get our new one in with our spacer, which is pretty tall. So So we're going to start by removing the brakes, and we'll remove the rotor, and then we'll work our way inward, basically removing everything in our way. We're going to start with our 8mm and 10mm sockets, getting our lines off of our knuckle and our chassis. Now I do have a caliper hanger tool. I'm going to place that right here. That's going to hold our brake caliper when we pull that off, as to not hang it on our brake line itself. So I've got my 8mm socket first. I'm going to remove our ABS bolt, and I'll grab my 10mm, remove our brake line bolts. Now we're going to remove our caliper, so we need to remove the two 13mm bolts holding that on. We've got our 13mm socket. Pop that off. Support your caliper. This other one out. We've got our caliper off. We'll hang that up. And once we have our caliper off, we can remove our pads as well. Pop those out. Sometimes this inner one tends to be a little stubborn, so we'll grab a screwdriver and kind of work that out. So we've got a screwdriver, and we're just going to gently push on this. You don't want to score your pad at all. Sometimes your clips tend to fall out with it. So you keep track of that. And if it does fall out, pop it right back in. Now we can remove our bracket that's held in by these two 21mm bolts. So we've got our 21mm socket, our ratchet. Get these off. So we're going to break them loose with this. And we'll run them out with our power ratchet. Now you'll want to support your bracket. Run this other bolt out. Remove your bracket and remove your bolt. Now we can remove our rotor itself. Next we'll need to remove our dust shield, which is held on by these three 8mm bolts. So we've got our 8mm socket, we'll pop those off. Pull our dust shield aside. Next we can remove our wheel speed sensor with our 5mm Allen socket. Get your bolt out. You want to very gently work this out of its seat. We'll work this out. We'll just lay this out of the way. Next we can remove our axle nut cover with a pair of pliers. Pop that off. Now we use our 13mm socket to remove our axle nut. Next we'll remove our tie rod from our knuckle. We're going to use our 21mm socket for that. Bring it out to where it has a few threads still on it. Sometimes these pop themselves out. Now while we have our 21mm socket, we're going to loosen our lower ball joint nut. You want to keep this on a few threads. That's going to catch your knuckle when we loosen that up. Now we're going to give our tie rod end a few gentle taps, or you can use a ball joint service tool. Pop that out. Now we're going to remove our upper ball joint nut with our 18mm socket and swivel. Now we're going to give this a few taps to unseat our ball joint. Now sometimes you can get lucky. The shock from doing this will also release your lower ball joint. There we go. Now we're going to pull our two vacuum lines off of our hub. They just pop back like so. Get those out of the way. Now we're going to get our nut off of our upper ball joint. That one out. We're also going to remove the nut on our lower ball joint. Get this off. Work our knuckle out. Sometimes you'll need to push up onto your control arm. Carefully remove your hub. Now that we have our hub out, we are going to throw a bungee cord underneath our axle so it's not just drooping down, because we're going to be moving this a lot. Take our bungee cord. And just hook it up out of the way, just to support the weight. You don't need to do anything crazy. Okay, now we're going to remove our sway bar end link nut with our 18mm socket. Now we're going to remove our lower strut mounting bolts. So ours have through bolts. They no longer have the factory studs, which you should use your 18mm socket for. In our case, we're going to use a 21mm wrench and a 22mm socket for our nut. Get both of these off. All right, so now that we have our lower mounting portion off, we're going to remove our 3 upper mounting nuts with our 15mm ratcheting wrench, and then we'll pull our strut out. Once you got your third one loose, let's support your strut. Get this last nut off. Pull this out. Now once you got this side off, you can repeat the same process for the other side. All right, moving on to the rear, we're going to be removing our rear shocks. Now for the bottom mounting bolt, we're going to need our 18mm socket and 15mm wrench. Then up top, the way the bolts face, we'll need our 15mm socket and 18mm wrench. So we've got a pole jack underneath to help support our weight of our rear. We'll get these bolts out and get our shock off. We're going to remove the nut from our bottom bolt. We'll keep this bolt in. We'll take our top one off. Again, for this top one, you want your 18mm wrench, your 15mm socket. Now we'll support our shock and pull our bottom bolt. Pull our top one and remove our shock. Now that you got this side out, you can do the same thing for the other side. All right, so now that we've got our shock out, we're also going to be removing our U-bolts and our factory block. So we're going to put our pole jacks under each side. We've also got one under our yoke on our differential. This is going to help keep your pinion angle where you want it. So we're going to remove the 4 21mm nuts off of our U-bolts with our 21mm socket. We've got the other side loose, so it still has a cage around it, but we can work on the one side. So we'll get this side situated, and then you want to do it the same thing on the other side. So we'll get these off. So we're going to remove our cradle. We can remove our factory U-bolts. Now we can lower our differential down. Pull our factory block out. All right, so now that we have our blocks out and our U-bolts off, what we're going to do is grab our new U-bolts, and we're actually going to put those in place first. Slide these over, they go right in the factory position. And we're going to install our factory cradle underneath, just loosely for now. This is just to keep the differential caged, just a little safety aspect. We'll get our factory cradle. Get that lined up. And we'll get our provided flat washers and nuts, just loosely on our U-bolts for now. Our other two in place. Once you have this side caged, you can do the same thing for the other side. We'll lower this down to add in our new blocks. Now that we have this lowered down, we're going to install our new lift blocks for the rear. Now these are tapered. You want the wider end of the taper to be at the rear of your differential. We'll get this dropped in to our perch. And once we have that in, we're going to bring our differential back up and line up our locators on our leaf spring. So we'll do the same thing on the other side and bring this up. So now that we've got our locators lined up, we're going to raise up our differential. Okay, now we can come in and tighten down our U-bolts. Now you'll notice these U-bolts are very long. They're meant for various lengths of lift blocks. So you can trim these down once you get them tight if you so choose. For demonstration purposes, we're not going to do that. We're going to take our 22mm deep socket and get these as far up as we can. If we need to, we'll switch out to our 22mm wrench. Now we'll grab our 22mm wrench, finish tightening these down. Now you do want to tighten these down as even as possible. And once you have these tight, you can do the same thing for the other side, and we'll come back and install our shocks. Now we can get our shocks back in place, get our upper mount back in. Flag nut back on. We'll use our 15mm socket just to run this in a little bit to keep our flag nut in place. We'll get our lower mount back in. You may need to compress your shock a little. Bolt back on, 18mm nut. Now we'll grab our 15mm socket and 18mm wrench, tighten these back down. Tighten down our upper mounting bolt as well. Once you got this side on, you can repeat the same process for the other side. Always remember to torque your hardware back down to the manufacturer's specifications, and you definitely want to get in alignment after you install this kit. All right, so now that we have our strut out, what we're going to need to do is actually rotate our top hat 180 degrees to allow for our mount to go onto the top hat and line up with our factory mounting points. So we've got our strut in our spring compressor just enough to relieve the tension on the top hat, so we'll bring that down a little bit. And again, you can use a handheld spring compressor if you need one. They're available for rental at any automotive parts store. We're going to use an 8mm ratcheting wrench to turn our top stud. It's the easiest place to grab it. Sometimes that's a little stiff. Sometimes you can take the whole top hat and turn it itself. We'll finish spinning this. And a good point of reference is you want your single side stud to line up with your bottom mounts. Make sure that's good. And we can relieve our tension. Once you have this one rotated, you can do the same thing for your other strut. All So now we're gonna grab our spacer, get that mounted onto our top hat and get our hardware in place to lock this in. Now you have recess holes and threaded holes. The bottom of your recess holes is gonna go onto the top hat like so. Then we need to get our flat washers, lock washers, and nuts onto our mounting studs. Now these can be a little bit tricky to do. I highly suggest you grab a small magnet like so. You'll be able to get these onto your studs. Got our lock washer. And we'll get one of our nuts on. You can actually start that with your magnet. Once you got that first one on, you can do the other two, and then we'll come back and tighten these down. Now once we've got all those on, we'll tighten those down with our 17mm socket. Now you'll notice these are through bolt mounts instead of the traditional studs like we have on our factory top hat. So to make things a little bit easier, I've got 2 bolts with the heads cut off of them of the same thread pattern. We're gonna thread these 2 in. This is gonna help locate our mounting point. So now we have those 2 in, we can start installing our strut. Now we'll get our strut in place. You may have to push down on your control arm. Get that in. Then we'll get our first provided 8mm Allen head bolt in place. You may have to move this around a little. Now we've got our first one started. I did take a locator out. It's the easiest way to get your first one in. Get this threaded in hand tight. Then we'll do the same thing for the other 2. So now that we've got our top bolts in, we're gonna get our bottom bolts in. Now, doing this at home with your factory studs in, unless you press them out, you might have to pull down or even loosen your lower control arm. Get these started. And we'll get our bottom mounting nuts and washers on. Again, these should be 18mm for your factory studs. And we'll tighten these back down. And for us, we're gonna again use our 22mm socket and 21mm wrench. Now we're gonna tighten down our upper mounting bolts with our 8mm Allen socket on a ratchet. And you can do the same thing for the other 2. Now we're gonna get our knuckle back on. So what we're gonna do is line up our lower ball joint and roughly our axle first. Get that hooked back Sometimes your axle doesn't want to cooperate, that's okay. If not, just come to the side. And around. Let's get our nut back on our lower ball joint. We're going to line our axle back up. Now once you've got your axle back through your knuckle, you can reinstall your axle nut. We'll tighten that back down with our 13 mil socket. Now we're going to tighten down our lower ball joint nut, and with our 21 millimeter socket. All right, so now we've got the vehicle lowered down. I've got a floor jack underneath our lower ball joint because we're going to need to assist this going up high enough to get our upper ball joint for our upper control arm back in our knuckle. Because if you try to just bring this down, it will contact the spring way before this gets all the way through. So what we're going to do, kind of line this up, bring this up a bit. So now we've got our ball joint through enough to get our nut back on. And we'll grab an 18 millimeter ratchet wrench and tighten this back down. Now if this starts to spin, you can grab an 8 millimeter wrench and grab hold of your stud, so we'll do that now. Now that we have this back together, we can install our tie rod back into our knuckle. Line this up, you may have to move your knuckle around. It is going to be a little bit stiff. That drop through. Knuckle back on. And we'll tighten that back down with our 21 millimeter socket. Now we'll get our sway bar end link nut back in place. Grab our 18 millimeter socket and tighten that back down. Next, we're going to reinstall our vacuum actuator lines for our four-wheel drive as well as our wheel speed sensor. So again, these just line up on the nipples on the back side of your hub. It's pretty hard to see unless you're right in here. They just line up and get pushed back on. No clamps or anything. We'll get our wheel speed sensor. We'll carefully get this back in place. Also, now would be a good time to clean it off. Got any corrosion or debris on it. Get back in. Reinstall our bolt. We'll grab our 5 millimeter Allen socket and tighten that back down. Now we're going to reinstall our axle nut cover. It just pops back in. And we'll reinstall our backing plate. Put this in place. Line that back up. We'll get our 3 8 millimeter screws back in. We'll grab our 8 millimeter socket and tighten these back down. Now we'll get our rotor back in place. Now to hold this straight, we're going to grab a lug nut and thread that on just to hold this a little bit more square. Now we're going to reinstall our caliper bracket. Get this line back up. Reuse our 21 millimeter bolts. We'll tighten these back down with our 21mm socket. Now we can reinstall our brake pads, so you just line your ears of your pads up. Pop those back into place, make sure it sits flush on your rotor. You can do the same thing for the inner pad. Now we can get our caliper back in place. Work that on. We'll reinstall our 13mm bolts. Now we'll tighten these back down with our 13mm socket. Now we can get our brackets back on. So we've got our 10 and 8mm sockets. Now once you have this side on, you can repeat the same process for the other side. Always remember to torque your hardware down to the manufacturer specifications, and you definitely want to take your vehicle in for an alignment after you finish this install. Alrighty, that about wraps up our review and install of our 3-inch front, 2-inch rear leveling kit for your 04 to 20 F-150, excluding the Raptor. Thanks for watching, and as always, for everything F-150, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.